Hey everybody, Errol here from At the Edge, Lessons in Culture and Leadership. Today I'm talking to leaders and coaches about one of my favourite subjects, the art and science of giving constructive feedback. I believe constructive feedback is the single most effective tool in aligning people to cultural, behavioural and performance expectations, and therefore enabling teams and organisations to gain a competitive advantage. So today, I'm going to share with you my 8 essential strategies to elevate your feedback game so you can create a culture where constructive feedback is not only tolerated, but it's actually sought after. So please stay tuned. Providing constructive feedback is both an art and a science. It's an art because we need to find our unique style, our own creative approach to how we give feedback. And it's a science because understanding the basics of neuroscience and how these play out in the feedback process is essential for our success. One of the key functions of leadership is building capability, both individually and organizationally. This is because it's the most effective way to drive sustainable performance. So we must consider giving constructive feedback to be an ethical consideration of leadership. And at the same time, for many of us, giving feedback is a little bit like broccoli. We know it's good for us, but we avoid it wherever we can. So today, I'm going to share with you my 8 essential strategies to giving constructive feedback. By the way, when I work with my own clients and coaching them around building their capability in giving feedback, these are the 8 strategies which we find to be most beneficial. So my first strategy is to find your unique style and creativity in your approach to giving feedback. This can be challenging if our particular style is countercultural. So for example, if we are more direct in our approach to feedback, but being direct is not part of the cultural norms of our team or organization. So leaders and coaches need support to continually refine, to unearth their unique style, and therefore where they can feel most comfortable, most themselves in how they give feedback, and therefore to access their feedback giving superpowers, if you like. My second strategy is to really know your intent. This is because it's the responsibility of the feedback giver to make sure the process goes well. We need to ensure that feedback is developmental and not punitive. Shaming and belittling have never shown themselves to be effective vehicles for sustainable growth and change. So we need to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of this feedback? Is it to support growth, accountability, and elite standards? Or is it just to criticize? And if it's the latter, I would suggest you postpone the feedback until the intent is really about growth. This will maximize the probability of it going well for both people. My third strategy is to consider timing and context. Feedback should be timely, but not rushed. Both you and the feedback receiver should be calm and focused. Giving feedback in a state of frustration or agitation, particularly if that's about the feedback receiver, is probably not going to be supportive of your outcomes. My fourth strategy is to make feedback a conversation as opposed to a monologue. To do this, we can invite the perspective of the feedback receiver by asking them questions like, how do you see it? Or how can we support you to address this? This fosters a collaborative approach to feedback in how it's discussed, but also how it's integrated into their role. Plus, using more we language as opposed to you language cultivates teamwork in how feedback is implemented. So my fifth strategy is to encourage a growth mindset by reinforcing that feedback is about growth, not judgment. Here, separating the person from the behavior can be really useful. So on one hand, we support the person And at the same time, on the other hand, we hold them accountable for unwanted behaviors. I find that the more we support someone, the more we can actually hold them accountable. So an advanced skill in giving feedback is using our nonverbal cues. For example, our voice tone, how fast we speak, or our facial expressions to support someone, while our verbal cues, so the words we're using, we use to hold that person accountable. My sixth strategy is to consider any defensiveness or avoidance as a symptom of insufficient psychological safety, as opposed to some deficiency or issue with the feedback receiver. When this happens, take a step back and prior to re-engaging with the feedback process, work on the psychological safety between the feedback receiver and giver. Or perhaps even better, work on the psychological safety for the entire team or organization. I believe that psychological safety is the most important determinant of how well constructive feedback goes and therefore how much benefit we can extract out of that process. My seventh strategy is to really watch out for signs of dissociation. For example, their eyes might glaze over, their face might get a bit frozen, or they might kind of reel back in their chair, or signs they're getting a bit irritated or combative. Consider all of these to be indicators that the person's fight or flight response has got activated. When this happens, cease the feedback process immediately. This is for two reasons. Firstly, in a dissociated state, people can't take their own side or represent their own perspective. And this can amplify power asymmetries, increasing the chance of feedback being harmful. The second reason, and here's where the neuroscience comes in a fight or flight state, a part of our brain called the prefrontal cortex gets deactivated. This is the part of our brain that's responsible for executive functioning, planning, and decision-making. So even if you continue the feedback process, it's unlikely the feedback can be integrated into their role and then used to enhance their performance. When I coach leaders around feedback that didn't go so well, this is often the key learning. It's that point where the person dissociates and that wasn't noticed, or it was noticed and ignored. And that moment kind of marks the point where the feedback process started to go downhill. So if there was one skill I would really encourage you to work on as part of your feedback practice, it would be to notice those signs of dissociation and then take the appropriate steps. My eighth and final strategy is to follow up feedback and make it an ongoing process. When we provide feedback regularly, it not only normalizes it, it enables the feedback giver and receiver to build capability in how feedback is given, how it's received, and also, perhaps more importantly, how it's implemented. So, in conclusion, providing constructive feedback is both an art and a science. It's about balancing empathy with clarity, support with accountability. When we give feedback consistently and effectively, it creates a culture of trust, growth, and belonging, all of which fuel performance. So, putting on my coach's hat for a second, which two of these strategies are most beneficial for you in terms of building your feedback practice? And then how do we commit to becoming feedback champions, where we are bold in offering feedback, compassionate in how we deliver it, and open to receiving it ourselves? Over to you.